So good morning to you, my good friends in Aberdovey, and greetings to you from Borth, from across the estuary. I'm really grateful to Simon Morgan for inviting me to join you in your service this Sunday morning, and want to begin by referring, of course, to the coronavirus and everything that's going on. The world has been turned upside down, hasn't it, by what has been happening. I don't know whether you know that the sale of Zimmer frames has gone through the roof as a result of Captain Tom earning £33 million by walking to and fro in his garden, leaning on his Zimmer frame. I'm looking forward to getting one myself so that I can see if I can earn as much money as him. So congratulations to Captain Tom. A world turned upside down by the curse of Wuhan. It sounds like the beginning of a new thriller series on Netflix, The Curse of Wuhan. But I want to talk to you this morning about the blessing of Wuhan, rather perhaps than Wuhan itself, rather the blessings from China. And in order to illustrate what I want to say, I want to draw from two events of history, one from long ago and one from more recent times. The one from long ago has to do with the stoning of Stephen, his martyrdom. And what happened immediately after that was that the church grew in a remarkable and different way. The Christians in Jerusalem were so terrified by the violence and intimidation, by the murder of Stephen and by the threats to their lives, that they scattered everywhere. Many of them went north to Samaria and then beyond that to Syria. But there was also influence that went south down to Ethiopia. The church grew as a consequence of something terrible that happened to it, the persecution that came through Stephen. That was event number one in Jerusalem long ago. We're told that as the church ran for safety, so it grew. Those who had been scattered preached the word everywhere, is what we read and hear. But this is event number two. And for event number two, we need to go to China in 1953. The communists have taken over. They have thrown out all of the missionaries, and the church is at the mercy of the communist authorities. The big question in the mind of the missionaries was, would the church stand? Could it stand without their leadership? Well, interestingly, what happened in 1953, or began to happen then, was three things took place. The first was that there was a new emerging leadership. Up until now, the missionaries had done all of the leading. No other leaders were necessary, so nobody stepped forward. But now, as soon as the missionaries were taken away, new Christians stepped forward in the churches in order to take leadership and to take responsibility. If they didn't do that, then there would have been no governing authority. There would have been nobody to cast a vision, nobody to decide on strategy, nobody to bring order and discipline to the church. It would have been a serious setback. But in actual fact, what happened was that new Christians stepped forward to take the lead. What happened here just before the lockdown in Borth was something quite interesting to me, in that one of our church members said to me, rather casually, I thought, I want to become a man of God. Now there is a leader in the making. When I heard him say that, I wanted to join him. I would submit myself to the leadership of anybody who made that kind of comment. His words made my soul respond, my heart ache for what he wanted, and I felt drawn to him as a result of his words. Won't it be fascinating to see who, during these weeks, has become a person of influence because of their steadiness, their inventiveness, their mastery of their circumstances, their involvement in the lives of those around them? Almost certainly we'll see new leaders emerging over these months who will be in a position of leadership and responsibility when the emergency is all over. So that was the first thing that happened in China. The second thing was this, that there was a new and energetic discipleship. In 1953, the spiritual responsibility for the discipling of individual Christians was on the shoulders of the missionaries. They had done everything for the new Christians, but now they are gone. They are not able to continue to feed and care for these new young disciples. They're going to have to take responsibility for their own spiritual growth or die. It was as stark as that. Until now, they've been like fledglings on the edge of their nests, opening their beaks for their Christian parents to fly back and forth and deliver their daily food. Beaks open, crying for food, flapping their wings, making their presence felt. But now they're going to have to forage for themselves. It's a matter of fly or die. No one else is going to feed them from here on. We have Christians in our church who for their whole lives have lived like those fledglings on the edge of the nest, beaks open, crying for food, glad to receive, but now they're going to have to search for food for themselves, to fly or die, to open their own Bible, to pray their own prayers, to look for spiritual nourishment, to search out Christian companionship, encouragement, stimulation, to grow. A lady said to me a week or so ago with a smile, she said, on a Sunday, I can now visit some of the best churches in the world. And she's right. So many of the top churches of our country are now on the web every week, doing some of the most creative things. But what was best of all for me was to hear that same lady who is becoming spiritually alive again, to have a text from her that said that she took communion last Sunday for the first time in 28 years. She'd been away from the Lord for all of that time. But now during the lockdown, she's taking responsibility for her own spiritual growth. She had found some bread and wine. She read those verses from 1 Corinthians 11 over the bread and the wine, and then she received the Lord anew as she ate a piece of bread and drank a sip of wine. Energetic discipleship. Fly or die. And then there was enthusiastic evangelism in China, beginning in 1953. Previously, the missionaries had done all of the evangelism. They'd been the preachers. They'd bought the evangelistic literature. They'd planned the strategy. They'd organised the follow-up. They had nurtured the new believers. The Chinese Christians had watched, grateful, impressed, but docile. Now a new generation of Christians was emerging in China in the midst of the most enormous threats by the communist government. Despite imprisonment and death, despite infiltration and intimidation, they could not be silenced. Secretly, the church grew because every Christian saw their responsibility to share their faith with others. All around us, despite the lockdown, there are endless opportunities for sharing our faith with others. Many are so anxious and fearful, some are bereaved, many are asking the ultimate questions of life to which we have the answer. Now is the time for openness about our faith and the difference that it's making to our lives. Earlier I mentioned how many churches were putting their services and sermons onto the web. The statistics of people who are looking at these Christian sites is quite remarkable. 24% of UK adults say they have watched or listened to a religious service since the lockdown started. Among people aged 18 to 34, the figure is 34%. Of those who have tuned into services, 5% have never ever before gone to a service in a church. These are days of unparalleled opportunity. From Jerusalem, the early Christians spread out and preached the word wherever they went. That would be the way to reverse the curse of Wuhan and make it into the blessing of Wuhan, the blessing from China, an emerging leadership, an energetic discipleship, and an enthusiastic evangelism. God bless you during this coming week, and thank you for inviting me to join your Sunday service today. Goodbye to you for now.